In this video, I'll look at camera navigation here in 3ds Max. I've created a couple of cameras, camera 1 and camera 2, and I've pressed C to go to camera 2, the view I'm in. I've got my safe frame on, which I've toggled on by pressing Shift F. Alternately, if you click on the viewport label, you can show the safe frames. To move a camera around, we have slightly different controls than our standard viewport controls. Some things are the same. For example, clicking the mouse wheel in and dragging back and forth pans the camera. Doing this while holding Shift pans staying in one direction, horizontally or vertically. Pressing Alt on the mouse wheel, however, still pans the camera. Down in the bottom right in our view, then, are our camera navigation tools, and we have to be in a camera to use them. First, in the top left, is the dolly camera tool. This moves the camera back and forth on its local Z-axis. Here's what this means. When I've selected my camera and press W for move, right now these axes are aligned with the world, or in this case the view. If I drop down here and choose local, in this case the local object coordinate system, the Z-axis of the camera is pacing in back, with the pivot of the camera starting on the rostrum. What this means is that the pivot of the camera is where the lens plugs into the body and aims back, giving us Z depth here from the camera, expressed as a negative number, and the dolly of the camera then moves forward and backward on the Z-axis of that camera. So when I press C for camera, F3 for shaded for example, and dolly back and forth, I am moving the camera, and this is different than a lens change producing a different field of view. Other tools then we have are a perspective tool. This actually does change the lens. As we dolly this up and down, we can see that lens number changing and the field of view changing correspondingly. A smaller lens produces a wider field of view, whereas a wider lens produces a smaller or narrower field of view in here. We can also roll a camera, and there's a roll tool. For example, a classic horror movie technique is to roll the camera over. And notice it's snapping here, because this is a rotation governed by my angle snap, which is on up at the top. If I turn off the angle snap, it's nice and smooth, and I can roll the camera over, showing one of two things. I'm either dizzy in the shot, or something bad is going to happen. Like I said, it's a classic horror movie technique to tilt the camera. This is called a Dutch tilt. To pull this back then, I'll press F12 for the transform type in, E for rotation, and there's the Y rotation, 17 degrees off, giving me that tilt. When I reset this back, the camera goes back flat. There's a field of view tool, and this manipulates the field of view as opposed to the perspective manipulating the lens. You can really use either one to zoom in on an object you like. There's the pan we've dealt with before, and an orbit. And this is the tool we need to select to orbit the camera around something. If you notice here, this is a free orbit. Clicking and dragging while orbiting and holding Shift orbits that camera, or does a nodal pan around the focal point of the camera, constraining the direction to the maximum or greater direction that the mouse is being dragged. It's pretty straightforward. We can move them around like any other object, and then use this camera-specific tools in the language of cinematography to position the cameras where we want. What I'll do, for example, on this is orbit over. I'd like to see more of the side of the bus stop here, and pan, clicking the mouse wheel in, dolly forward, bringing this camera in and really filling that frame with the bus stop here. If you're familiar with the rule of thirds, I've got this poster on the third line, so our interest is drawn into it. Lastly, I'll change my lens back to a 35, so I feel a little closer and things aren't as distorted. Check that dolly, and then press W for move and right-click and check the height of the camera. Right-clicking and choosing the dialog next to move, and making sure I'm using the world coordinate system. In this case, the Z of the camera is 42, so I should probably pan up a little bit, holding Shift, so it looks like I'm standing in the street. We can use the same tools to position the other camera, but understanding how to get in here and move this camera in a camera-specific way is very important.